Welcome to Evolve, Reinventing Leadership, Building Freedom Cultures, with thought leader and award-winning author Yvette Bethel. This podcast provides you with insights and ideas you can use to reinvent your culture through trust and the principles of interconnectivity, flow, and balance. At a time when the world is rewriting the rules of work, traditional leadership practices are not enough. It's time to perceive persistent challenges through a new lens. It's time to evolve.
All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome once again. This is your host, Yvette Bethel, and the topic of this episode of Evolve is the architecture of accountability, how organizations stay true to what matters. And we have with us founder of Wave 9, Philipp Schett. Philipp is one of the world's leading experts on OKRs, which stands for Objectives and Key Results, and the founder of Wave 9, the fastest growing OKR consultancy globally, with a background that includes leadership roles in major telecommunications firms, strategy consulting, and time at Meta. Philipp brings a rare blend of operational depth and strategic vision. He's led over 250 OKR implementations across a wide range of organizations, from 400-person nonprofits to Fortune 10 companies with over 150,000 employees. Philipp is known not just for helping organizations get better goals, but for transforming how they think, prioritize, and lead through meaningful structure and cultural alignment. So welcome, Philipp. Welcome to Evolve.
Thank you so much for having me. Hi.
It's my pleasure. I'd like to start because I don't want to assume everybody's familiar with OKRs. They may have other nomenclature or acronyms for the same thing. So if you can share with us what it is, what they are, and why they're important.
Absolutely. Yeah, happy to do so. And OKR stands short for Objectives and Key Results. And so in the most simple form, it's a syntax for how you write down your goals. And you use that syntax to write down your goals in a qualitative statement. That's the objective. So you write down a sentence that summarizes your intent. What do you want to do? What do you want to change?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the key results. And those key results make very measurable how you know you're achieving your key result. And so, as an example, you might have an objective like become known as the world leading OKR consultancy. So that might be an objective you have, maybe. And then key results for that are maybe the inbound requests you're getting, right? Or maybe the requests to join certain podcasts, or the number of books you sell. Yes, there's a book coming. So that's something how you measure that you're actually achieving that objective. And then we sometimes like to add the A, which we translate into actions. So then we say OKRA. Sometimes that makes it a bit more bit easier to understand, because then you have your key results and then you have your actions, and those actions are then how you achieve those key results and how you move those needles. And so yeah, at the most simple form, it is a syntax for how you write down your goals. But as you can imagine, the syntax isn't what made OKRs so popular.
You started to tell me a bit about how you got into them. I think it's a very interesting story. So can you share with our listeners, how'd you get into this?
Of course, yeah. As many of the listeners might have guessed by now, I'm not originally from the US. I'm German, and I moved to California in 2014, and more specifically to Silicon Valley. And I did that because I was fascinated with technology. I was fascinated with innovation. And I thought, okay, they must have figured out something over there that maybe we in Europe haven't really figured out yet. And honestly, when I came there, first I was fascinated, but then I was a bit disappointed almost because I realized the ideas aren't that different to ideas we have in Berlin, in London, in Paris, or Stockholm. And you know, I quickly learned that it wasn't the ideas that were different. I quickly learned that it was the urgency, the accountability, and the energy those people and those organizations were bringing to the table. That was different. And then I switched from trying to understand how they generate new ideas into how do they move from an idea to an executed idea so fast. And OKRs became one of the key tools and key methodologies that were helping organizations to make that happen. And then I met Deidre Packnett, the founder of Workboard, uh, the leading OKR platform, OKR and strategy execution platform.
Mhm.
And I met her and I knew that she was onto something right when I saw her, and she has a very unique energy. And so yeah, that was 10 years ago, and 10 years later we are growing together.
Oh, that's powerful. So, I think people are familiar with scorecards and those kinds of things. How are they similar or different than the OKRs? Is it?
Yeah. So it's not easy to compare OKRs with any other methodology because if you compare it to KPIs, or if you compare it to balanced scorecard, or if you compare it to, again, any other methodology you might know, you will quickly realize that you are comparing one ill-defined concept with another ill-defined concept that means something else for everyone. And so that's not always easy. And so, but I will try. I will try my best. So OKRs are different in some form to other methodologies. So OKRs, I think that one of the most important differences is that they are transparent across the organization.
Mhm.
So we are setting OKRs for the leadership team of an organization. And sometimes that's a leadership team of a 150,000 people organization. And after the meeting, granted a couple of days typically after the meeting, so that everyone had the opportunity to sleep over what they just created. But a couple of days later, we make that public to everyone in the organization.
Mhm.
And I rarely see people like making goals so transparent. And so we make the OKRs of the leadership team transparent, but then every team, like the marketing team, the sales team, the engineering team,
Mhm.
uh, they're all setting OKRs, and all of those OKRs are transparent. So transparency is a big part of the methodology. And it's honestly probably my favorite part because it is such a simple hack that yeah, just make it transparent, just give everyone access. But it's such a powerful change in many organizations because you suddenly, you know, you talk a lot about trust, right? And trust, I think transparency builds trust. And so I think that's just so important that yeah, you start breaking down the silos in an organization. You make sure that marketing knows what sales is doing, and maybe you even set cross-functional goals. And so that's something that's very important. Another different differentiator is that we set them for shorter time frames. So you're most often used to setting annual goals. Like honestly, I still do it myself. I set goals December, January, often with my wife, and we set goals for the year. But we, yeah, we often tend to forget them by February, March, right? The annual goals are just like they're easy to forget. And so we break it down into much shorter time frames, most often the quarter, sometimes a trimester, but I like quarters because they are short, snappy, but still good enough to get work done.
So,
And
yeah.
so that's another big difference. And then yeah, then there are five main differences that I will tell you. The third one is that we co-create them. So that means, you know, I'm old enough to have done my like started my career in a time when managers came and told me what the goals are for the year. And that was typically, well, males in their middle-aged man that we're now telling 15 to 20 people, okay, these are our goals for the year. I've went away with the rest of the managers, and now here is what we are working towards. And that is not necessarily the type of culture and the type of command structure that creates most ownership, right? There are some efficiency gains in this. Yes, that's true. It's very efficient, but it doesn't create excitement and it doesn't generate a lot of energy. And so instead, we are inviting every team to set the goals themselves. And so I think that's something that's very, very, very important as well. And yeah, then the fourth big difference is that we are, instead of setting and forgetting them, we are creating habits, and we are creating them for 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 every team, so that we can achieve those goals, not just forget about them. So it's important that you bring them to meetings, that you bring them to your one-on-ones, to your weekly team meetings. So that's another key difference. And then the last one that I want to highlight is that we set them cross-functionally. So
Oh,
instead of building a scorecard just for the marketing team, we might invite marketing, sales, and product into one team, and then we set them cross-functionally. There are
oh,
more minor differences
yeah.
as well, but those are the ones that I wanted to highlight.
That last one is quite powerful because you tend to have your people that, think alike, setting the goal. So it's good that you have cross functionality built into your system. It's powerful. I'm thinking, when you started this all, you must have had some powerful aha moment when you saw it work. Like, what was one of your first ahas where you saw something meaningful happen?
Yeah. What I loved about doing this in the beginning was that I got to know the US very, very well. So I was living in San Francisco, but I wasn't spending much time there. I was out and about 220 days a year,
Mm.
flying to Philadelphia, Chicago, New York, even Alabama and Birmingham, Alabama. And so like many, it was a great time because I had no idea how big the US is until I flew everywhere almost. But what I loved was that I came and went to meet a whole organization and get to know all those people and help them formulate what they wanted to do into something much more measurable and much more aligned across the organization. And so there were a few of those occasions when we flew into like Philadelphia, for example. We fly into Philadelphia on Sunday, then we stay there for a couple of weeks, do a workshop with everyone, every team in the organization. And
Mhm.
then afterwards, the CEO and goes into their monthly town hall meeting and tells everyone, I've never had that clarity. I never had the visibility into what everyone here is working towards. And that were really, really powerful, powerful moments. Of course, I mean, when you're tired on a Friday afternoon, right, you want to go home, but you're excited for this. You're excited for this town hall, and then you hope the CEO likes what they see, and or what they experience. And then if it really works, then that's fantastic. And so, yeah, it was really and and not only from a CEO perspective, I think even more powerful was sometimes when, I don't know, you're sitting in an accounts payable OKR workshop of a team that is responsible to make sure that, yeah, they are being paid on time, and that that everyone else is being paid on time too. And so that is often a bit, let's say, the very tactical work. And they said, okay, it was hard for us to really understand what role we play in this organization, and to really understand where this organization is going and how we can help, and how we can make sure that the organization is successful. And now after that workshop, they told me they were able to now finally understand how the change in the organization is impacting them as well and how they can help. And so those are really, really powerful moments when I
Mhm.
flew back. Now, during that time, I also learned from some of our failures, because sometimes it wasn't all great once we left, but I can tell you about that. Yeah, that as well.
I'd love to hear, because it really has dimension to how these things work and don't work. Kind of, it's not linear, so it goes forward and back and forward and back. So yeah, I'd love to hear that.
Yeah. I think when I tell people that I work with leadership teams and organizations to set goals, right? Well, they rightfully think that's a relatively simple task. And yes, sometimes it can be simple, but it's
Really.
not necessarily easy. So, but when we did this 10 years ago, often we stopped after we set the goals.
Mm,
And with enough experience, I'm sure you've experienced that yourself. Like, setting a goal doesn't make it happen. Setting a goal is exciting, and you can dream and you can hope, but without the energy and the actions to make it happen, it's wishful thinking. And
right.
so I I flew to Philadelphia, flew to Chicago, and then maybe back to San Francisco. And then maybe 6 weeks after the workshops, I call my clients and I ask them, "Hey, Peter, hey, hey, what's going on?" And then Peter was telling me, "Hey, yeah, Phil, it's so good that you're calling. I want to maybe you can come back in 6 weeks and set our new OKRs." And that's great. I love coming back. But then I asked, "Okay, what's going on with the OKRs that we have just set?" And he was saying, gotta be honest, we completely forgot about them and life happened. We got really, really busy." And so I had to realize that setting goals and flying to workshops is exciting, and it's energizing work. But if you don't install the systems and the habits in an organization to actually follow through on those ideas and on those goals, then, well, it's also pretty meaningless work. And so that's why we created the OKR Breakthrough program later, where we just didn't just stop with setting goals, but really installing those systems and habits later.
Mm. You worked with organizations of multiple sizes, very small to much larger. And I'm curious about what patterns of organizational dysfunction do you see repeating themselves across scale? And how do OKRs help to reveal and resolve them?
Yeah, there are a few patterns that I think are always interesting. So when we work with very small organizations, it's often that they're struggling almost more with the interpersonal conflicts than the fact or what they are working on themselves. And so very often that's yeah, those are early dysfunctions. Oh, he said, she said, right? That kind of behavior we see very, very often. And they often lack just fundamental management systems, right? Just writing down stuff or not chasing a new idea every week and being able to focus on something. So
Mhm.
very often we we just install OKRs as a very fundamental way to write down your goals and not change them for 3 months. So in a large enterprise, it might be exactly the other way around, right? You write down your goals, and now you can suddenly change them not once per year, but you can change them every 3 months, and that's agile and that's rapid. Well, for very small organizations, it's often the opposite. They used to change them almost weekly sometimes. Again, of course, oversimplifying, there are many organizations that are don't have these issues, but we saw it very, very frequently that they were changing their goals too often. They weren't following through. And so that was very often difficult.
What are
And
the
then,
what are
yeah,
the risks of changing your goals too often? I think that's an important point to kind of expound upon.
yeah. There are every time you switch your goals, you have switching costs, right? And that's something to be aware of. Now, if your goal has lost its value, then you need to change it. And so it's that slippery slope, right? Where if you don't change it and you know you should change it, then it often loses its value because the organization already feels that this isn't relevant anymore. There's no management attention anymore. And so but you're still officially counting it a goal. That doesn't help either. But if you are changing it too often, let's say every other week there's a new priority. I worked in organizations where, well, they were even changing their name to reflect a new priority, right? And then suddenly that priority wasn't a priority anymore a year later, right? Or even a few weeks. And so if it happens too often, people get fatigued. People get fatigued. You lose credibility as a leader if you change your goal too often. And yeah, you also again have pretty direct cost. You are losing. Yeah, you have to cascade and localize it again to everyone in the organization. You have to make sure that everyone understands the new goal. And very often you suddenly have a fragmented organization. You have a few people that still follow you, and then you have maybe many people that that are still at the iteration before the last goal and are still following that. And that happens all the time. We see people just stopping to get the memo. And so, yeah, it's you need to and that's also something that I want to highlight, that we do have a quality check-in for our OKRs where we reset them. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to change them. It's just a checkpoint where very often you can copy them forward and you can still follow the same goals,
Mhm.
but you make it intentional. You don't make it oh, we will change them when change is necessary, but you make it okay, we know in the future when we will look at them and when we reset them. And so instead of just continuing until you can't continue anymore, you now make it an intentional continue or not continue decision. And I think that's crucial.
I like the fact that in your process, you focus on healthy transformation. And my next question for you is, how do you help leaders of teams to break from coercive habits like micromanagement or overalignment while still keeping the organization focused and accountable to the OKRs?
Mhm. Now, that very much depends on the type of leader we're working with.
Mhm.
So we have leaders that are stuck in their own habits but are eager to change. And then we have leaders that are stuck in their own old habits and are not eager to change. And that requires a very different toolbox. So let's start with the easier one. Someone is stuck in their old habits, but is eager to change and wants to adapt the new methodology, is in on the new framework. And then it's actually relatively easy, right? We have five building blocks. And the first one is change management. And then that means that it's a broad concept, right? But in practice, it means that we are making sure that they have the backing from as high up in the organization as we can. So we get the CEO, the COO, someone very often even a board member, really saying that this is important for the company and why it is important for the company.
Mhm.
And so that person sells the idea so that a manager or a team lead has an easier time working with their teams. Because if they have the backing from higher up, they have, well, they have the credibility to do actually do this. So it's much harder if you only do it in one team. Now, that change and that communication from high up also, well, also bites the other way around, where now the the team members know that this is supposed to happen and can keep their team lead accountable, right? So it goes both ways. But then we have training as the next pillar. And so the next pillar means that we give everyone the training that they need to be successful. And so in an easiest path, it is, well, it's it's group training, it's exercises, it's that kind. But then if we see that someone struggles, it's often also individual training, right? So that's that's important as well. So we have change management, we have training, and then we go into the workshops with us as coaches. So we work hands-on with them so that we see them in action. And that is also, yeah, that's important because we have done a few thousand of these, and I can already sense very, very quickly if a leader is buying in or if a leader doesn't really want to be there. Sometimes they even are just not showing up, right? That also tells me a lot. Or they're showing up, different extremes, right? Sometimes they are not showing up at all, or sometimes they are showing up, dialing in if it's a virtual meeting, and then being off camera for 2 hours, right? It's those things that you don't see when you are just, I don't know, talking about in theory, but but it's easy to spot when you're with someone in a workshop. Or the other way around, they are sometimes coming with a very strong draft. Oh, I've prepared a draft for the goals of my team. And then,
Yeah.
yeah, you know,
Yeah.
okay, this person just wants these goals to be signed off. And so that's important. And then, yeah, then we install a community of subject matter experts in OKRs. We call them OKR champions that can help them if once we are gone. And so they're experts in the methodology, but then also the habits. And so we train all of those. And yeah, and then lastly, we make sure that the program is managed well by a strong program team that can address the second factor. If someone doesn't really want to change and just wants to stick to their old habits, then, well, then sometimes you have to have a conversation, right? And if that conversation doesn't lead anywhere, then you have to slowly escalate it to the manager. It's 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 sometimes it's not the pretty work, I would say, but
Right.
it is sometimes necessary. If an organization decides that this is the way we want to manage as an organization, then, well, then people need to disagree, but then commit.
With that, I think that's a great place for us to take a break. So this is your host, Yvette Bethel, and we'll be right back after this message. All right, so welcome back to Evolve. Our guest for this episode is founder of Wave 9, Philipp Schett. Welcome back, Philip.
Well, yeah, thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. It really is. You've said, oh, I believe that you believe that structure doesn't have to mean rigidity. What's your philosophy on creating structured freedom, and how do OKRs serve as scaffolding uh,
Yeah.
instead of cages?
You know, when I started working on a structured program to introduce OKRs, the German in me created a lot of structure. As you maybe can imagine, right? It was very German engineering, very every detail was fleshed out. Uh, Sometimes, okay, at this time of the day, you need to do this, and everyone needs to do this and this
Oh,
and this and this.
really?
And then it was very complicated spreadsheets with columns and columns and columns and rows and rows and rows. It was a disaster. And it was absolutely not practical. And so I tried it a couple of times with clients that were eager to, that were maybe matched my German engineering energy, but it never worked. It never worked. And so we had to give it up. And so instead, you set up systems that are maybe not perfect in the sense that they cover every little edge case and design every minute of every day, but that are still moving an organization forward because they install some fundamental truths and fundamental frameworks. And
Mhm.
so let me give you an example. So instead of telling a manager, this is how you need to run your one-on-ones. This is what you need to say in the beginning. This is what you need to say after 5 minutes. This is what you need to say after 7.5 minutes, right? That doesn't really work. But hey, it's just setting some fundamental expectations. Like, hey, first of all, you should have them. Second, you should they shouldn't be just about coffee meetings that you have like over at Starbucks, right? You should take the time. You should set up some time to prep, even if it is just a few minutes in the beginning, but you absolutely need some time to prep. Second of all, you need to do notes. And then thirdly, you need to do a follow-up. Like in the most basic sense, sometimes we are just installing some extremely simple guidelines. And so also, maybe we aren't saying everyone needs to update their OKRs on Friday, 2 p.m. Eastern sharp, right? Maybe we
Yeah.
say, okay, well, it should happen roughly in this, but it should happen once a week, right? Maybe not every, but once a week. And so and that's where it becomes tricky, right? What are the fundamental guidelines and what is exact process description?
Mhm.
And some leaders that we work with, well, they don't want to ask anything from their teams. So very careful, very shy. And then we have others that are very, very specific about what they want to see. And so our goal is always, with our experience, to recommend something that we know is feasible and doesn't break as soon as someone is not doing it exactly as planned. And so that's what I would describe now as a resilient system, right? A resilient system is a system that's still a system, but it's a system that doesn't fail just because, well, Phil didn't fill in the OKRs at 2 p.m. on Eastern on Friday.
I am curious about, well, I think OKRs are usually seen as performance tools, but from your perspective, when or how can they be used as trust building tools?
Mhm.
My favorite topic.
Yeah. You know, we don't recommend clients to set OKRs on an individual level. So, and that is something that's so first of all, it's just math. It's just extremely cumbersome to set OKRs. Let's say you have 1,000 people organization. That's typically between roughly 150 teams, about 8 people per team, sometimes a bit less, sometimes a bit more, but
Mhm.
roughly 150 to 200 teams. If all of those 150 to 200 teams set OKRs, and then you have some cross-functional OKRs, right? That's already many OKRs. It's already a lot of OKRs. If you
Mhm.
now say, okay, in addition, we want 1,000 people to set individual OKRs for themselves, then you have 1,000 sets of OKRs that someone needs to look at, that someone needs to update, that someone needs to manage, that need to be considered in conversations. So it's just typically not worth, the juice is not worth the squeeze. And instead, we recommend keep it at a team level. And that is already a big factor in in building trust, because we are not making it a tool that becomes an algorithm for your performance, my performance, and everyone's performance, but it is a tool that is used to make sure that teams are working on the things that move the needle the most. And so that's that's why it's important. Then also it is important how leaders manage with it, and how they deal with it. If you tell people your goals will be transparent, you set your own goals, and you should ideally stretch, and you should ideally set ambitious goals. If you do that, and then as soon as Margaret from HR doesn't hit her goals, you are you're firing her, or you are calling her out in front of everyone in the organization. You are destroying any trust you might have built. And so it is almost less about, and that's why it's I always emphasize it's really not about the syntax. It's about the way you manage with goals and do think about goals. And therefore it is important that you stop managing just with the delta between, oh, you said you want to have 80, now you only have 50. Okay, you're going to be punished in whatever form. That doesn't work, and that's not helpful. And so, yeah, it's super important to not set them on an individual level, to manage in a very consistent and careful way with them. And yeah, and then to rather celebrate successes instead of punishing non-achievement. And if you
Yeah.
do that regularly, right, celebrate the success together, then you can use them as a trust building tool. But trust is such a difficult thing. It requires so much to build trust, and it is so easy to destroy.
That's
Right? Therefore, got to be extremely careful.
yeah, it's a living thing.
Mhm.
Anyway, I don't want to go down that road too deeply, but I think some organizations attempt to build OKRs themselves. But what are the benefits of them working with you or a company like yours to help with the building of the OKRs?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm happy about everyone who succeeds on their own, because I want I want more organizations to just have this, and therefore, if organizations succeed on their own, then I am happy, because I I really believe that organizations that are transparent about their goals, that are more agile and are less rigid, and that ensure that everyone is involved in setting their own goals instead of just someone, ordering everyone and asking them what to do, then those are better organizations to work for. And so that makes me happy. Now, there are still benefits to working with us, and so we with OKRs, the challenge is that, again, it's an ill-defined concept. And if you tell people to Google OKRs, right, they will end up getting five different definitions. And if you ask ChatGPT, you will also get a different definition here and a different definition there. And
Right.
so it's often very, very difficult for people to really know what it means and really understand how they can translate that abstract concept into something that is actually practical for them. So that's often very, very difficult. And then it's often very tactical work. So, and by the way, before I go to the tactical work, they're also just efficiency gains, right? Many of our clients want to move fast. We have all the playbooks, we have all the experience, we have all of that ready. So very often, if you do it yourself, it will probably take 18 to 24 months, right? When we do it, we are done in 3 months. So it's just very, very quickly you will see actual results. Now, but also the tactical work is often very important. It's even ChatGPT can create some OKRs for you. absolutely possible, and we use it ourselves. What ChatGPT is not good at yet is going into a leadership room with 8 people and
Right.
making sure that all of the discussions that are needed to be that needed to happen, that you can see in someone's eyes if they don't agree to something or if they aren't on board. And then you have to moderate that, and then you have to go into the next conversation with the next level leader and make sure that they still follow the course. And you have to negotiate that, and you have to make sure that sometimes you have to have a dinner conversation or a breakfast conversation with someone, and you have to make sure that they are actually on board with this, not only with the methodology, but with the actual new strategy. So it's very often you work with a consultant because they can help you get there more quickly, but often also they become your accountability body. They become your facilitator. They become the negotiator. They become the diplomat. And so the consultants that we employ in a during during a rollout, they have very different roles, and very often it's a team of 5 or 6 people, and because they have different skill sets, and copying those skill set in-house is often a bit more difficult.
As a final question, what's the biggest misconception about OKRs that holds leaders back from using them?
I think the biggest misconception that's stopping people from using them is that people are sometimes overthinking it and don't get started instead of just doing it. If you do it a few times, you will you will figure it out, and if you just have to keep doing it. No one sets the perfect goals and executes against them perfectly in the first quarter. But and then if you stop doing them, and if you then suddenly say, "Oh, this didn't work. It wasn't I didn't get fit in the first time I visited a gym," right? It just doesn't happen overnight. You
Yeah.
just have to keep doing it. You have to put in put in the work sometimes. Like, I'm running a marathon next month in Berlin, and
Nice.
look, it takes a while until I'm ready for it, right? It doesn't happen overnight. And that's the same thing with OKRs. You will see results really, really quickly, but if someone is telling you you're gonna 10x your company overnight just because you write down your goals in a different syntax, it's not that simple. It will happen, but you got to put in some work.
Yeah, so with that, I'd like to thank you, Philip, for joining us for this episode of Evolve. I think developing and implementing OKRs is a decision that can powerfully impact organizations, and your insights will certainly help support leaders with thinking more about implementing them if they haven't already. So before we sign off, Philip, please tell our listeners how they can connect with you.
Yeah, thank you. My LinkedIn, you will find me on LinkedIn under Philipp Schett, and the company is Wave9, wave9.com, and that's wave like waves, and nine as a word, and that's wave9.com.
And thank you. This has been Yvette Bethel with Philipp Schett. And we'd like to thank you for joining us at Evolve, Reinventing Leadership, Building Freedom Cultures.
Thank you for listening to Evolve, Reinventing Leadership, Building Freedom Cultures. Learn more about our proprietary trust, leadership, and culture courses and certifications at the IFB Academy. You can check them out at organizationalsoul.learnworlds.com.